Again, good morning, and thank you all for joining us for this Professor Circle. This particular series has been entitled What We Know, What We Don't Know, and Moving Forward in light of the new executive orders that are coming from the President of the United States and just the state of affairs that we're in. This particular session this morning is going to be looking at the status and future of DEI efforts and initiatives in higher education. Again, would everyone please mute themselves? And we're pleased to bring to you to facilitate this particular session, Jose Melendrez, who is the UNLV Interim Vice President for Diversity Initiatives and the CDO. And as I said, this session is only listed to be an hour, and
Yeah,
I'm sure
go
that
for
we'll
it.
have a lot of different questions
Sure thing.
that people want to have answered or thoughts. And so I am going to just kick this off to Jose, and he can facilitate this session and bring in any additional individuals who he wants to be a part of this session. So thank you, Jose, for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Harriet, for coordinating this. And obviously, the conversation is timely, and there's a lot out there. There's a lot that we're trying to react to, and then there's a lot that we don't know yet how it's going to come at us or what's happening with that. So, just to get it started, I want to introduce David Hatchett, our Vice President for Research, is joining me today because I know in over the last couple of weeks I've been in multiple conversations with faculty who are doing research that has a connection to DI. And there's been a lot of questions there in regards to what can they do, what can they not do, how do they move forward on that, do they not move forward? So I invited David to join me today on this conversation. I'm going to say, Harriet, the chat's available if they want to drop other questions in there as well, right?
Yes, thank you for saying that. I'm hoping that people will use the Q&A if they have
Okay.
a chat, have a question, but certainly the chat is for any comments that they might have. That's fine.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I know obviously in this 1 hour we're not gonna get to everything because there's just so much going on. I think last night the President Trump said that he'd already signed over 100 different executive orders on different things and all of this. And so right now, I guess what we'll start with is there are three specific DI related executive orders that have been signed, and one is ending radical and wasteful government DI programs. Another one is ending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity, and then another one that attacks the transgender community. So those are the three that we're aware of. As you all know, that there was a letter that came out from the Office of Civil Rights, Department of Education, and they kind of were the person there, depending on who you listen to, they kind of really overstepped the boundaries of what is there. Since then, on a national level, there's all kinds of litigation going forward. We received a letter, a memo that was written by multiple academic legal scholars who put out and basically identified just so many places where the executive orders are in violation of actual law. So I think from that perspective, I'm glad to say that here at UNLV, we're holding a little bit. And before we go and start, deleting websites and changing language and all this kind of stuff. So, but again, there's a couple of parts. There's what the federal government does and orders through these executive orders. We know, and I'll let David talk about it more in the sense of what's happening with some of the grants on the federal level. So there's what the federal government dictates. Then, if you're tracking what's been happening for the last 2 years, remember this conversation is not new. The Chronicle of Higher Education has been tracking this for over 2 years now. Of the bigger states, what happened in Florida, what happened in Texas, where Utah, where those were state mandated by their state legislatures to end diversity, everything diversity shut down. Uh, Other states like Oklahoma, where you've had executive orders signed by the governor. And so what makes Nevada unique is that we obviously have our state legislature, we have our governor's office, but then we also have to be ready and respond or work with the Nevada system of higher education and what our board of regents decide is diversity or not diversity. And so I know those conversations are happening right now. Another part, if we saw the three executive orders that specifically target DEI and those communities, there's another one in regards to immigration and undocumented students, which, here at UNLV, we have a large population. And I heard one report right from NPR, National Public Radio, that Nevada, Las Vegas actually has one of the largest undocumented populations in the country. And so thinking about what that looks like. And so that's a little bit of what we'll cover today. And again, I'm hoping this will be more of a conversation so we can address concerns and anything that's out there, and we'll try to do the best job we can. But again, I'm going to remind everybody, there's still a lot we don't know. There's still a lot that's going on, and we're tracking and monitoring and all of the national organization, all that, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But real quick, David, I'd like to turn it over to you, and maybe you can start us off with, because I know there's several faculty members on here who are concerned about the grant issue. So if you can give everybody an overview of that and what we're seeing.
Sure. So thus far, UNLV has received, I believe, 6 notices of termination for all the grants, totaling about $4 million. So, and I will tell you that is a drop in the bucket in comparison to a lot of institutions. I think UNR lost 20 million in one day from USAID, for example. I think, though, what I would say is, and Jose kind of alluded to it, is the university, we are, and, to Phil Burns' question, we are monitoring what's coming out as it in the impacts on UNLV specifically. And we are taking a conservative approach, meaning we are not rushing to implement anything because a lot of it is being held up in court, to be honest with you. And so you can think one of the things that chaos creates is this uncertainty and the tendency to react, quickly, kind of knee jerk. UNLV is taking the approach that we are going to be more conservative in the way that we react because it's always much harder to walk back something you put in place. So, we are monitoring how it will impact students, how it will impact faculty. I mean, I'm sure, we're talking about DEI today, but I will tell you from a research perspective, NIH capping indirect at 15% is pretty catastrophic for every university in the US. And that would shut down a lot of research at most universities. So we monitor that very closely. The message I will say to everybody is we don't know what we don't know. That's the problem, right? That there is uncertainty because there has not been clear direction at any level. There's simply executive orders. I guess, for there to be any clear action, it would require Congress and Senate to actually do their jobs, and that hasn't happened. Thus, we have executive orders being pushed out at a rapid rate. So we are going to monitor it. We are going to follow the court actions. But let me be clear, the EO that talks about diversity, inclusion, etc., that is already being implemented, and it is not going to stop unless there is a stoppage in court. But the only reason the court put the TRO in place is because it said, if you have an existing contract with the federal government that allows you to do research, you can't arbitrarily stop that with an executive order. That does not mean that in the next negotiation or budget cycle that they can't force that EO or the contingencies described in the EO on researchers. So that's what you're going to see. You're going to see grants that have DEI in them unfunded in the next cycle, likely. So that's our expectation, is that's when we will start to see these kinds of actions where grants are terminated. It's when there's another budget negotiation or a new contract signed. The ones that we've lost, some of them weren't actually at UNLV. They are awarded, but then they never went into negotiation to sign that contract because of the executive order. So they were terminated. There were two of those. The other three that were terminated were passed through, and it was the same situation. It was the next round of funding was coming in, and they just terminated the grant. So what I will tell you is we are monitoring it on a daily basis, and we are asking faculty to let us know when they receive letters. Sometimes we receive the letter first, sometimes faculty receive the letter first that says the grant is terminated. To answer the question that's in the chat, are terminations from grants coming from particular institution or across the board? Thus far, I've seen NIH, I've seen USAID, and then I've seen pass-through funds from places like NSF and Army. So it's a variety right now. And I would expect that we will see more of that. Melva asked, when you say grants that have DEI in them, what exactly do you mean? I mean that in the description or title, they call out diversity, equity, and inclusion in various forms. But if you look at like how they are looking for these, they are literally using keywords as the search for these kinds of grants. And I'll give you one that I find just an example of and I'm going to use a term that probably I shouldn't as a VPR, but ignorance that is going on, and that is biodiversity. Biodiversity deals with, bacteria, species, etc. It's a real thing, right? We're not talking about diversity of animals and giving them, rights that they shouldn't have, right? But yet that is a grant that was identified as being unacceptable. So, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason as to what is being focused on. And in some cases, the funding agencies are asking for faculty members to revise their grants and not trying to terminate them. So my point to everybody is, we will weather the storm. We will try to figure it out. But we don't have a lot of guidance from each federal agency. The last thing I'd say about this is every federal agency is doing it differently because there is no uniformity. There's no discussion of how this is applied across the board. Funding agencies are allowed to interpret that executive order as they see fit. So that means one funding agency may do one thing, another funding agency may do something completely different. So we have to monitor each and every communication to see how they are implementing the executive order. So what I would say to everybody is take a deep breath, try to relax and realize that we're here to be partners in working through all of this. That's the cabinet is on top of this, and we talk about this and how we will mitigate the impact on faculty and students. So I hope that helps. And I'm certainly willing to answer any and all questions you might have, if I can, if I have something I can answer.
Thank you, David, for that overview. So I know there were some questions submitted. There were some questions submitted online for the session, and so I'll take the first one, which what will become of the DI office and diversity initiatives at UNLV? I can tell you right now that we are moving forward. As David said, we still have the work that we've identified that we're trying to do. Obviously, a lot of my time has been now taken up with tracking what's happening on the national level with all the different national groups, the National Association for Diversity Officers, the American Council on Education are two of the ones that have been more prominent in this area. As you all know, we are HAKU, we are HSI and NAPZ, designated under Title III and Title V. So all those organizations are starting to line up in this effort, and that includes recently HAKU submitted a letter looking at challenging what the Trump orders and all this, and other organizations are doing the same thing. So we're tracking all of those and following what's going on and the recommendations. And now there's this group of legal scholars who have jumped in with the official memo and starting to put information out there. The President's Alliance on Immigration, which is a high-level group of presidents of universities who support and do everything with supporting our immigrant and undocumented populations, DACA populations. So we're tracking all of those, and as the information comes through, trying to provide an update. What I will tell you, as far as again the office, there, as you all know, there was a search going on. We put a hold on that because of the current climate. So I'm in the interim role as long as I'm asked to serve, and so we're continuing to do that. We are, if it comes down to where what a lot of folks have started to do, or other campuses are doing, is where they are starting to look at, David pointed out in the grants, right? There's specific language that are trigger words that target them. And so we are looking at those and working with how if we have to pivot, if we have to pivot and change names and language, okay, we'll do that. But we'll still continue to do the work that has to be done to serve the diversity of our student population and to support our faculty and staff on campus. In one of our, as you all are familiar with or not, we have the MSI task force on campus. And in our most recent meeting to discuss the current climate, Provost Hebe, now officer in charge, identified the fact that, hey, no matter what comes out of the federal government, we still have the diversity of all the students. So whether it's Hispanic, Anapizi, Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, we are still going to serve those students, and we are still going to support our faculty who do the work and the research and all that pertains to all of the diversity that is UNLV. So we might have to call it something different, but we're ready for that, and we're holding firm. Again, given the climate right now and the lack of direction, or the craziness of the direction, we're holding tight right now. We're not going to be changing anything overnight right away, but we are monitoring, we're tracking, and we're ready. If we have to pivot, we will and continue to do our work and move forward. So are there any questions, comments?
There is a question in the Q&A from a participant. It says, didn't a Maryland court find the EO on the ban of specific language unconstitutional, as is content specific and a violation of the First Amendment, and issue an injunction and direct funding to be reinstated?
Yes, and that's
conflict of interest, conflict of commitment, and disclosure course.
Not sure what happened with that, but okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of confusion, but there is a lot of Nevada has signed on to some of the lawsuits that our Attorney General Aaron Ford is got Nevada involved with in regards to all of this. There have been several. Some of the tracking that's coming out is responses from other Attorney General offices in other states that are taking this on as in their areas. David?
Yeah, what I would say is, unfortunately, the court orders have been ignored by the Trump administration. So that is the crux. Even when there have been judgments to hold or halt or temporary restraining orders, the administration has just ignored them. So you've seen that they've been called back to court to explain why they have not obeyed. So again, even when there are court orders, it seems that this administration doesn't necessarily follow them. Now, the funding agencies, when that was put back into play, all the funded grants, then invoices were allowed to be processed. So we are seeing that invoices are being processed and the research is still being done. So that's at least one good thing the courts have initiated, is that the positive was that we were able to continue to do the research. And until this is resolved, we would say continue to do your research. Until you get a termination order, continue to do what you do.
So I do have a question. In thinking about the grants that the university receives, that actually further and enhance these efforts, I can't help but wonder about what this means for the Center for Academic Enrichment and Outreach, where so much of their operation obviously is federally funded, coming from the Department of Education, and certainly has a focus, a foundation in DEI. You know, that perhaps is more of just a concern versus a question, but I mean, certainly it is something that concerns me. And I think I see Kyle's hand up, so I'm gonna toss this over to him.
Thank you, Dr. Barlow. Thank you for raising that question, but I've always contended that TRIO programs in particular are not diversity programs because we are funded under the same umbrella as federal financial aid programs, and we don't refer to financial aid as diversity programs. And so in that sense, our focus has always been first gen and low income. Where we do and are a little bit nervous is within our McNair program, where it does specifically state that there is a need to increase faculty diversity, as well as in our ANAPISI grants, which specifically indicate we need to serve a portion of our students that are from Asian, American, and Pacific Island communities. And so those are the two areas, but with TRIO overall, for the most part, we don't, my perception, I can't speak for the center, but from my perspective, is that I think TRIO will be okay. I don't know about ANAPISI, and I'm a little nervous about McNair. But thank you for bringing that up because it is one of those that it's the monster in the closet, and I don't want to open the door. And so, you know, but
Okay, I'll close that door right quick. I'm
right.
closing it. Okay.
But you know, all that to say also is that we just don't know because it seems somewhat arbitrary sometimes in some of these decisions. So it is a little bit nerve-wracking too.
And again, you know, there's so much there. If you're following it, there's just so much litigation going forward right now. He's being sued left. You know, the administration is being sued left and right, and people are making a fight. There's also, you know, there is a grassroots level of there are a group of universities and colleges out there that are aligning and finding their ways to push back and fight back. And so again, you know, just kind of following all of that. The big unknown for us is again where I know our board of regents that they've held several meetings. They recently met with all of our offices of general counsel, and so determining what directive they're going to give. But we just need to continue to do our work and move forward again. You know, we're not unless something really drastic happens in terms of that. Oh no, now you got to change everything. We're ready to do that, but the work will still continue. And so I think folks need to be focused on that, and you know, all of that. We also are looking at. I know David's been tracking again of what funding is being impacted, what could be impacted, and thinking about how we move forward under those circumstances. So.
So there's a question that I'd like to address
Yeah,
because
please.
this comes up. Hannah asked, have we discussed our PhD students? I know I have two right now focusing on DEI for their development dissertations. Doesn't feel right to guide them to stop what they are doing. So the interpretation of the university is that your academic freedom trumps anything that is contained within an EO or even a dear colleague letter, meaning you can still teach and you can still have students working on DEI related research activities. Now, whether or not they're funded by the federal government is another story, but academic freedom means your students can do that, and there is no reason to stop that. What I'll say in addition to that is we are watching, the grants that are being terminated, and we are working on making sure that students are not the recipients of this, action, and that we mitigate the impact on our students. None of us want to see our students suffer through, these decisions that they have no say in. So we are actively monitoring that there, and we are looking at contingencies if students that are funded on grants are no longer funded on grants. So rest assured, that is something that is in our plans.
Okay, so we have a question, and Teresa also raised her hand. So I'm going to do the question first, and then you can follow this up with you, Teresa. Okay. Is UNLV joining coalitions that are fighting back against the EOs?
Yeah, we were one of the initial, the Maryland, the that was brought up, the Maryland temporary restraining order. I submitted an affidavit that for UNLV as the VPR. So yes, on multiple levels. Yeah, we're not sitting back and just saying we should have to do this. We are actively pushing back where we can. And I will tell you and I think Jose brought this up. Aaron Ford, our
Attorney General.
Attorney General, is constantly in contact with us to join and fight back on some of these things that we believe are not good for our state.
Yeah, and also right away, we have met with all of our federal delegation and submitted to them all of our concerns, the impact areas of impact. So we're in communication with them also on again on the national level, as David was talking about. We are in alignment with multiple of the NADHIO diversity officers, the Hispanic Servant Research University Alliance. We're working with all of those groups as they start to how they fight back or how they push back on all of this. So we're working with all of those groups and doing our part to where we can to support and to provide information, things that we see are happening or that are impactful in this area of DI across Nevada and at UNLV. So we're in the middle of all of that and trying to move forward. But I want to remind everybody that the situation literally changes every day, if not every couple of hours of what's coming, of the craziness that's coming out of DC. And the other point I want to point out is that we, and I think it pertains to one of the questions that was submitted about that we seem to be a little slow on the announcement side. I want to remind everybody that the way we're set up as a system of higher education in Nevada, that we do have to work and cordially work with our regents and the Nevada system, but they're having conversations daily about how we move forward and how we react as a system. So as we learn more and as information gets out, hopefully there's going to be some direction coming from INCHI in terms of what they feel we can or cannot do. But again, I would say at the end of the day, we're going to do what we need to do on behalf for the good of UNLV and the students and the faculty and the staff that we work with. And so that's top of mind for all the craziness that's going on right now. That's top of mind for how we're trying to navigate and work through these very crazy issues and areas that are coming forward daily. So then I see Teresa.
So I just wanted to circle back because I know this is something we recently talked about, and it relates to the questions on DEI and research because I'm a state line, and I know I had brought this up in a private meeting, or not a private meeting, but in another meeting with the student leadership in regards to how this is affecting us. So I just wanted you guys to quickly maybe reiterate it. In this space, because I know it was a concern that I had, where if we're doing research in our departments, how do we know the state's not going to then come in and take away those lines that might be doing DEI research. And I know you guys told me that that's not going to happen, but I'd like for other people to be able to hear that.
Right. Yeah. What I would say is right now, there is no indication the state is moving in that direction, and there is no statement regarding how universities perform or what they do in terms of research. And again, it comes down to intellectual freedom, right? Both students and faculty at a university, regardless of political ideology, have the right to do research on things they think are, their choice. And we do not interfere with that as a university. We do not interfere with that as a state organization. If that happens, there would be a large pushback, not only from the institution, but probably from, the Civil Liberties Union, etc. This would not stand. The one thing that is well known is the faculty's right and the students' right in terms of intellectual freedom. So I would say you don't have to worry about it right now. Now, does that mean there won't be action or attempts? I'm not going to say that, because I feel like everything we're going through right now is that attempt. And if we don't push back, then it'll succeed probably at some level. So I'm glad our university is pushing back. I'm glad our state is not adopting policies, because I'm going to tell you, Florida, other states are adopting these policies as is. They are not fighting back. So students are being impacted directly in what they do and what they can't do. So.
Yeah, and that's a good example. In Florida and Texas, for example, they literally shut down everything overnight, right? And people lost jobs, and multicultural centers were closed, and multicultural programmings were ended. That's happening. It happened next door in Utah. It was state legislative mandate where those things are. And so, to David's point, I'm glad that we are pushing back. Nevada hasn't jumped on board with all of that, and just continuing to monitor the situation as it moves forward. Blanca?
Hi, Jose. I just wanted to point to one of the questions in the chat raised by Kyle. I also share that concern, so I don't know if you can share UNLV's stance on that.
The question that Kyle raised in the chat is, I'm nervous about the efforts that are occurring that are facilitated by students and staff. Specifically, our American Indian community has been engaged in our Native graduation ceremony, powwow, and beginning of the academic year ceremony. Are these programs safe?
Well, again, not being an attorney, not being a politician, or at least don't want to be a politician. Right now, they are. Like I said, we're sticking with what we have. We're sticking with what we do. We're supporting our affinity group work on this campus. The other thing I would point out to this is that while the Department of Education is still in place, there are protected classes that are identified into those, and those are still, if you look at some of the researchers who are working in this area, a colleague of mine who's at the Texas A&M, his argument has been, and I think most folks are still working with this, is that while the protected classes are still in place, we can do that work, and so we were just in Texas for the Hispanic Research University Alliance meeting, and there they had to end DI, but they transitioned. So now you have the programming office for Hispanic serving initiatives. You have the programming office for Asian American Pacific Islander. You have all these designated offices now because those protected classes are still there. So we can still do that work. So as of right now, and again, I say this understanding that politics is politics, and it's a moving target. Right now, we are still working with. There will be affinity group graduations this spring. Working with all those groups, we have our affinity group President's Advisory Council that is still in place. So we are still moving forward and working and supporting all of those initiatives. Again, as I read it right now, if we have to pivot and change names or use different language, okay, but we're still going to work to serve all of those communities.
Lucky you're not listening.
That's where we're at right now.
So are there any questions in the chat or the Q&A that folks feel like that may have not been answered? I'd like to give you an opportunity to voice that now
Yeah.
or to pose the question. I tried to
Yeah, no, I
get
see
through them all.
Teresa put a comment in there about Senator Cruz Crawford. She is a friend. She is an ally. I've actually had a couple of conversations with her about different ways that we can think about it. So I'll give it. Is Dr. Jackson on the call? Uh, Blanca, you might know this. So Aisha, Dr. Jackson shared with me that in California, for example, they actually moved to establishing their own designations within the state of California. So California-based designated black initiatives and other things like that. So so that's just an example of that. If we had to pivot, I've shared that information with Senator Cruz Crawford, and she was like, "Wow, that's an interesting idea." So there's different ways that people are looking at this, that we can work on this. But right now, again, to David's point and what we know right now, we're holding tight, we're pushing back where we can, we're monitoring, and given that space to continue to support who we are and how we do what we do at UNLV, embracing all of the diversity, supporting our students, supporting what our faculty and staff are doing in your research and your programming components. So that's not going anywhere right now. And we're holding tight and continue to follow what happens.
So a question from Christina. This is based upon what just came out yesterday about protest on campus. What is considered an illegal protest, and what, if any, ramifications would happen to students, staff, and faculty? Sarah, if there's anybody who's able to answer that.
I'm going to say we have always allowed. The one thing I've always heard from leadership here is that as long as it is a civil protest, we do not stand in the way. I mean, the reality is you have the right as a student, staff, faculty member to protest. As long as it's not violent protest, then I don't believe there is any issue on this campus, meaning we will not police it. I think, in fact, when there have been protests on campus, the only thing the police have done is said if it started to get uncivil, they went and asked people to to do it peacefully. So my understanding is there is not an issue there.
Yeah, and then I know Phil's on the call. We have a working group within student affairs, student conduct, and all the other areas where when these things come forward, we're there to monitor and support and make sure that everything's being followed as done. Phil, I don't know, you want to talk to that a little bit, Phil?
I just really wanted to, I think, confirm everything Dave said. From our perspective, we absolutely will support students' rights to still gather, protest. And again, the only thing is occasionally time, place, and manner, situations come in that, you can't disrupt a classroom or something like that. But no, we absolutely will continue to support students' rights. In fact, we will probably encourage students' rights to protest.
Yeah, and there are, like I said, Harriet, I'll send out I tried to paste it in the chat, but it won't work for me. So just remind me, everybody that would like to get a copy of the memo that was written by the legal scholars that are pushing back, I'll be glad to share that so you can kind of see the points they're making in regards to what's happening with the Trump administration. So you can all have that and you can do what you need to do with that. But again, it's programs like this. I would dare say that maybe we are doing a protest because we're having this meeting, we're having this conversation right now. I was things that were scheduled way before the current administration took hold, where I've done some sessions, working sessions and trainings on DEI, and it was concerning to me that can I even say the word diversity now in these sessions? And so I have been saying it, but when you break down the definition of diversity, and that it is about inclusiveness, it is about bringing everybody to the table, and so still being able to do some of that work and how we do that forward. So again, to David's point, and what we're trying to say is that we're in the mix, we're doing everything we can, and for those of you who are monitoring, a lot across the state of Nevada, a lot of folks are looking at what UNLV is doing. because of the diversity of our students, because of the diversity of what we have at the table in our campus community. And so a lot of folks are looking to us as to see how we're responding, what we're doing. And some people will say, well, there's a target on it. Well, maybe, but we're doing this work and we're going to continue to do this work. And there's a lot of great initiatives on campus that are moving these things forward, and we'll continue to advocate for these things, no matter what we have to call it or the language, if that day comes. So.
Yeah, and the Greg asked and this has come up in cabinet multiple times. Is there any impact to this point on our curriculum? We have an undergraduate Gen Ed 3.0 credit hour multicultural requirement. It is my understanding, and this is based on legal analysis of the Dear Colleague letter, that any curriculum is exempt from that, meaning curriculum, again, falls under academic freedom. So we are not going to change degree programs that are gender specific or specific to race, creed, whatever. We're not going to, as a university, in any way, shape, or form infringe on academic freedom. That is not in our plans. Likewise, we will not direct people to change their research in terms of DEI. We're not going to do that. What we're going to tell people is be mindful that it might not be funded. And if there's an area you can pivot to that will be funded, look into it. But we don't, and I don't believe this institution has ever taken a heavy hand in trying to direct people in terms of their academic freedom. So I would not expect that to be the case. And in terms of the next question, I've not heard anything like that being implemented at this institution.
Yeah, no.
For much the same reasons that I just stated in terms of academic freedom for students and faculty to learn and teach.
Are there any other questions, concerns, comments?
So, I guess I have a question or comment or whatever related to the snitch line, right? Well, I can assume that everybody on this call, that we are the choir and that we are concerned about what these EOs mean, not only for us individually, but for our institution. But there are folks who don't have that common thought, and that are really in many ways diametrically opposed and very much in favor of the executive orders, disbanding or doing away with DEI, immigration, and so on and so forth. So having said that, I guess my question is how do we combat that, so to speak, right? What is it that we do in order to, I hate to even say fight back, but when you realize that we have colleagues who don't share these feelings or who don't share these ideologies and who are very, very much against even what we're talking about here this morning, what do we do? Because that in and of itself, going back to Melva's question, while the snitch line may not be, something that is sanctioned, I think that in many ways that it will still be there and make life difficult for so many of us.
And
Yeah, go ahead, Melva.
can I add to that question? Because for faculty of color, our course evaluations historically are lower than our white counterparts. And now in this climate, my concern is how far will a student take? Oh, I didn't like what this faculty member said to me. I didn't like this grade. I didn't whatever. it's going to go beyond the course evaluations. What stops a student from picking up the phone and calling ICE and saying, you need to come to campus and get this person? What stops someone for whom I walk in their office and the sheer fact I'm there is a problem for them, taking this to another level, which now threatens my job, my livelihood, my position? I think I would like to see some thought and discussion from the administration of, this isn't just about executive orders. That yes, this is about our colleagues, and this is about how students perceive your faculty of color. And in light of these new executive orders, these dear colleague letters, what can be the ultimate impact on your faculty and staff of color in particular, as well as their colleagues? I have a daughter who's a sophomore at Arizona State. They had the college Republicans tabling on campus, telling students to please report anybody that you suspect is here illegally. Okay. That doesn't stop anybody from reporting someone who they have no idea, or simply the fact they don't like them, and the disruption that that causes to that person. And I think we need to think beyond, oh, well, it's academic freedom. Oh, well, it is, but really understand the world that we are living in and the impact, not on the student body in general, but on specific aspects of the student body and faculty and staff, that this is really going to have an impact on.
No, and that's a great point, Melva. And I'll tell you right now, since all this started, I'm reminded every day that large percentage of our campus community did vote for Trump and all. They're not going to get political, but that's just the reality of it. And so, and not being an attorney, and I don't claim to all the legal stuff, but understanding that, what we have right now, as we're seeing, is that there are laws in place that do protect this, and we need to be constantly monitoring that and being aware of that. I think to Melva's point about campus climate, yeah, that's a whole other area, and we need to be sure that we're mindful of that we know what our resources are. And I know, this morning we had a cabinet meeting and talked about it, and I know there's a lot of things that are going to be coming our way in regards to diversity, and thinking about what that looks like. So strategically, that's a great point that you just made, Melva, and I just added it to my list of many conversations that are going to be coming our way as we think about how to respond and how to react, and maybe try to get ahead a little bit of this and how we're proactive around these issues as much as possible. And then I see, Bill, I see you've had your hand up for a little bit.
So I just wanted to say a couple of things about that. One is that the Senate leadership has been pushing the administration, and I think we're going to get there, so that we're going to start doing more than just student evaluations to evaluate people's teaching, for the very basis that your identity affects, right? It's not just people of color, it's women who are affected, especially young women whose teaching evaluations are in the format that we do, that online nonsense. So we know, and we've been working with the university, actually with Skip's office, to get some data that we can actually start making sense of what the data are telling us about our student evaluations. But we want to have, it's required for promotion and tenure. It's not required for annual, that there be some other form of evaluation of your teaching other than just the student evaluations. So we need to make that cultural on campus, so that there is more than those, right? And I had a 200 student class where 16 of them answered the student evaluations. And when those kind of things are happening, one or two people, as Melva said, one or two of those people can really screw up your evaluation. And we know that the deans were given a list of the 25% lowest student evaluation performers in their units, which we have pushed back on and said that is a really stupid and dangerous thing to be doing. The other part is I agree in what Phil said online. I agree. A lot of this is us standing up. A lot of this is us making sure that our deans are understanding that we're expecting them to not put up with this stuff. We need to not put up with this stuff. If something's going on with one of your colleagues, you need to stand with your colleague, and everybody just needs it. It's hard to do. I mean, it's hard to do sometimes for us in higher ed. We're used to doing our research and are sitting in our offices and doing our things. And this is the time that we all need to be together and we all need to stand up together. And we need to protect our colleagues and our students and our staff and everybody on this campus. We all, 35,000 of us, need to be protecting each other as best we can. Right? That's where we need to be, and do those little things like there are ways we can change the numeric data that might be used against you so that it's not in a position that you would see that. That's all.
Thank you both for that, and thank you, Melva, for that, and Phil, thank you for your words in the chat about this. Again, these are challenging times, difficult issues, and we're going to work through them. And I appreciate the point about we need to find those places where we can support each other, work towards creating those safe spaces on campus, creating those spaces where politically, if we disagree, but we can still have those conversations and dialogues that continue to move our campus forward. And so, I would tell you, are we tight on the 11 o'clock in time, Harriet?
We're pretty close. We have
Yeah.
about 8 minutes.
Yeah, so I would tell you if there's any other questions, comments, concerns, please email me so that we can get those. And again, as I can continue to serve in this interim role, I will put that forward to leadership, and I will continue to advocate. For those of you who know me, you know that I've been in a whole bunch of political diversity fights over my 18 years on campus, and I will continue to advocate for that because there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And moving forward. So please send me those comments, send me your thoughts. Another thing that we're doing, and I'm glad Melva, and I think I saw Irma here, that we have 3 other diversity officers who serve within their respective colleges or schools. And so something that we're moving forward with is and it's something that was long before me, but the creation and implementation of what we're referring to as a council on inclusive excellence. And it is intentional to be a place where different colleges, departments, schools would have a representative on that council. And I think these are some of the things that we want to start looking at right away as how we approach that work with everybody on campus who wants to be at the table with us to have those conversations, and how do we create those safe spaces. And so that's what I'm committing to while I'm in this role, and that we move forward during these challenging times, and so that we can continue to do the work that we need to do. Because at the end of the day, it's about how we continue to serve the diversity of our students, how we continue to support our staff, and support our faculty who do research in all of these areas. And so I'm hoping that we can continue to build community around that, and that we really come together during this time. And I've been in multiple sessions and conversations and meetings, and it's been said to me multiple times, this is what's happening right now is our civil rights struggle of this generation. A lot of folks have alluded to the fact that what some of these executive orders are doing is undoing the Civil Rights Act of 1964, undoing the Civil Rights Act of 1965 with the voting rights, and that's what this is targeting. And so to see this happening in our time is where we're going to need to be ready to stand up and hold ourselves accountable and work where we can to move forward. So anybody that has ideas or you want to get more involved, let us know so that we can make sure and include you as we move forward with whatever this is going to continue to look like for UNLV. And for those of you who can, I know some of you are very vocal in regards to working with how we work with our Nevada system of higher education. So if this is something that you think is a priority for you, I would say if you have the ability and the desire to come forward and speak up during public comment, that how critical this is to sustain who we are in Nevada, who we are at UNLV. So I would put that out there as well. David, any closing comments you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say to everybody here, and I've said this on multiple occasions, because, when I say intellectual freedom, I mean more than that. I mean inherently UNLV is diverse. It is who we are. It's not manufactured. It's not here because we use the terminology in our grants. It is the fabric of what this university is, and it makes us better. So I agree. We need to stand up for one another. We need to make sure that we are positive voices in the negative voices that exist around us. That is on us, meaning we control that. There are things we don't control, but what we do control is our ability to use our voice positively. So I appreciate everybody's comments and questions, and I understand we are certainly in a time that causes severe anxiety, but we can work together to get through this, and we will have to. So that is the commitment of Jose. That's my commitment. I'm doing it from the standpoint of research, but I understand research impacts faculty and students alike. And I'm here to be a resource for you if you need it. So you can contact me anytime.
And I see somebody popped. I was hoping we'd get out of this session without having to, but it's in there. So the issue of the president, as we all know, our President Whitfield did step down. And I can tell you just from personal experience, Provost Heavey, who's now the officer in charge, I believe he is as committed as anyone to how we continue to move our DEI efforts forward. And those of you who've known him know that he stands on that. And in my 18 years, I know that the many times that I've worked together with the provost office or with Chris in these situations, there's been support for this. So I don't think that's going to change. I think that's a priority for him. He understands. He's the one who leads our MSI task force, and he made the comment that for me hit hard. It was heartfelt in the sense of we have the most diverse student population across the United States of many institutions who we serve, and we have a responsibility to serve. So I don't believe that's going to change. I think the commitment is there, the priority is there, and again, just this morning we were talking about it in our cabinet meeting that this is a priority for who we are and how we move forward as a university. So we're in this struggle together, we're in this fight together, and we'll continue to move these efforts forward. But anybody who wants to get more involved, send me an email and we'll get you involved for sure.
Bill, you had your hand up before we close out?
Well, I put it down and wrote it in chat. When the regents pick the search committee, if they pick one of the 5 or 6 regents who are anti-DEI to be the search committee, we're in trouble. If they pick the regents who are fans of UNLV and who have a commitment to DEI, then the presidential search will be good. So we all need to get, as this process goes through, the faculty and staff of UNLV needs to be very active, talking to the chancellor, talking to the chair of the board, and making sure that, certain regents are not chairing the presidential search.
Yeah. And I believe in this process, Bill, I know you know this very well. I believe it was mentioned today that starting March 24th, I think the chancellor and Chair Cavajo are going to be on campus to start that process. So again, to Bill's point, excellent point. If you have the ability and the foundation to be willing to speak up, I think it's critical that they hear from all of us about this, so that whatever process they go for a new president, that person understands that we are an MSI, we are ANAPZ, we're HSI, the diversity of all of our student groups, Native American, American Indian, Black, we have all of that, and that they need to be able to serve and work in an institution that has that kind of foundation. So yeah, especially our faculty with tenure, I think it's critical that they hear from you, so that we can continue to make that argument. And from another lens, I know David will appreciate this, but Skip and I and David and all those, we've been working around all the equity dashboards and all that. So we have a lot of data that tells our story, and we'll definitely utilize that as we continue to move forward in this issue. So with that, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us, David. Thank you for making time to join us on this one. And I can probably guarantee that there'll be more of these to follow. I'm working with Harriet and our team. We're working on some things to set up, bringing on not only like the ACLU and the NAACP and other folks who are on this national fight to bring that information to campus and make sure that you're getting all the information you need and how we all move forward as UNLV. So for that, thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us at this Professor Circle. Next month, Professor Circle will be on April 1st, not that first Wednesday. It will be on April 1st, and the topic will be higher education in general as we face this new administration, and our Provost Hevy, now our, what is it? What's his correct title now?
Officer in charge.
Officer in charge, Provost and Executive Vice President and Provost Chris Hevy will be leading that discussion. So I hope to see you all next month. Thank you all for your continued support, and we're in this fight together. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.